What's the most terrifying thing you can't believe you survived? Story 1. When I was 15, I was on a jet ski, and a speedboat hit me going 40 miles per hour. My life jacket flew off, and I was unconscious and going under. My boyfriend at the time was on a jet ski behind me and grabbed me. I was in and out of consciousness, but I remember feeling the bones in my upper leg grinding with each wave. I woke up in an ambulance with my dad crying. I asked if I was going to live or not, and they said they're doing everything they can. I did end up coding in the ambulance, and they brought me back. I ended up with broken ribs, and my femur was shattered into 14 pieces with internal bleeding. I am quite lucky to be alive. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button, and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I choked at work. Not the kind of choke where you struggle for a second and drink a gulp of water and all is good. This was a full-blown choking, and a young intern ran over to perform the Heimlich. I was chewing on a pretty large piece of Korean beef rib, knowing full well I should have cut it up smaller. When it was first stuck, I kept drinking water, but it would not go down. Then I tried to spit it out, and that didn't work either. This is when full panic set in. Realizing I was choking, I staggered out of my office with my arms flailing, and before I could point to my throat, my coworker jumped up and immediately began the Heimlich. It worked slightly, but I was still gasping for air when another coworker jumped over to continue the Heimlich. I just remember looking around at people's faces as they stood in horror, thinking I was not going to live. All I could think about was how long it would take. Finally, after what seemed like 20 minutes, I could finally breathe fully. After a few minutes, I casually went back to work, but then I Googled what to do after choking and decided to drive to the urgent care. Good thing I did, because within an hour I experienced the worst nausea ever, and then the projectile vomiting and headache started. It turns out I had aspirated. I was rushed to the ER and stayed for 4 days due to my low oxygen levels. The nurse told me I most certainly could not have lived if no one had done the Heimlich maneuver and done it properly. Funny enough, it was the 2 youngest guys in the office who helped me. I am so grateful. Story 3. I was almost offed when I was 19. The guy I was dating drugged me, and I woke up in the middle of him essaying me. He panicked. I think smothering me was harder than he expected. He seemed to change his mind after I woke up 3 mirrors 4 times because he stopped waiting till I passed out to take the pillow off my face. Once he was finally done, I played nice, pretended nothing happened, and kept calm until he untied me and eventually let me leave. I know I should have called the cops, but at the time I simply wasn't capable of talking about what happened and blamed myself. Therapy eventually changed that, but it took years. He passed away a decade ago. Visiting his grave was satisfying as heck. Story 4. I got appendicitis within 12 hours of receiving a rabies shot. I went to the ER 2 different times and was sent away because it was abdominal pain and a stomach ache from vaccine side effects. On my 3rd visit, when I refused to leave, they did an ultrasound and found out my appendix had already ruptured and I was going into septic shock. If they had turned me away one more time, I wouldn't have been alive. I was only 15 at the time, and my parents took the doctor's side and were more than upset to drive me back to the hospital a 3rd time. It was against a lot of odds that I lived. I told my parents it felt like I had a gunshot wound in my lower abdomen, but they were convinced it was vaccine side effects. It's sad that a 15-year-old kid has to fight with medical staff to get life-saving care. I didn't have health insurance when I went to the ER for appendicitis. It took 5 hours for me to get called, and when I did, the nurses told me I probably just had kidney stones. I wanted to go home, but my girlfriend at the time asked me to stay. I went back to the doctor, and he was also convinced it's definitely kidney stones. He tells me how expensive the scans will be and suggests I go home. I get up to leave, and my girlfriend begs me to stay and offers to pay for half of whatever it costs. So, I stayed. They do the scans. I had a raging case of appendicitis that had just ruptured. The doctor scheduled me for emergency surgery a few hours later. If I had listened to the medical professionals instead of my girlfriend, I might not be here today. Story 5. I ate a poisoned sweet from a friend at school at the beginning of this year. I want to say that this was long before the event of the girl who expired after consuming a poisoned cake, and maybe that's why I wasn't aware that eating something that others offer could be dangerous. I am in high school, and I've already changed schools at least twice this year. At first, I was at a private one, and then I went to a public one, and soon after, I changed to another public school again. In that public school that I mentioned at the beginning, that was where the incident occurred. At lunchtime, I usually stayed with a friend there, and that day she was absent. Lunch lasts an hour, and I eat very quickly, so there was a lot of time without doing anything. I waited until I arrived at 12:30, so I could go into my room and stay there until class time arrived again. It was just me, and suddenly a group of boys entered the room. I knew them all. They were from my class. In total, there were 3. 2 of them were my friends. One of my friends had a jar of birthday sweets inside and offered me one, and I ate it, and that's when everything began. The class ended at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. When I got home, I started to feel bad. I reported this to my mother, and after about 30 minutes of being very nauseous, I vomited. I vomited a lot, several times. The discomfort went away briefly after I vomited, and then it returned again. I was so weak that when I vomited, I felt my blood pressure drop and I couldn't even stand up. From what I said, I vomited at least 14 times at home in a period of 2 hours. My father decided to take me to the hospital. We went by car. I vomited 9 more times in the car, and when I arrived at the hospital, I continued vomiting straight away. Luckily, I had brought a lot of bags, so I always threw up in the bag and not on the floor. Anyway, I was seen after an hour or two and several exam sessions, and I was still the same, wanting to vomit. The situation was so critical that I was dehydrated, and there was nothing in my vomit but water because there was nothing left in my stomach to get out. It was the most tense period of my life. I was in a cold sweat. I felt weak, and I wanted to faint all the time. I only got better after taking a lot of IV fluid. We must have gotten home at 1 or 2 in the morning. Everyone was dead tired, and I had a very sore body. That day I asked to die because I couldn't bear to suffer so much. I don't think I've ever felt as bad as I did that day. After that, I asked to change schools, and I cut off any kind of contact with the boy who gave me the candy. Never accept food that others offer you because you don't know the origin of it and whether or not they put something in the food. Story 6. While testing a building's pond overflow pump by pulling up a float switch, I got badly shocked by 277 volts. The pond had waterproof lights running on 277 volts, and when I reached into the water, the current traveled through my hand and out through my knee into the ground. After the shock, I measured the voltage between the pond water and the surrounding dirt. It read around 256 volts. We ended up disconnecting the lights and locking them out until the building could bring in someone to redo the setup. Fortunately, I am a big guy and had on good boots and pants, so I didn't fall in. I just felt the jolt and yanked my hand back. My arm was sore for a few days, but I got checked out, and everything was fine. This happened a year or 2 ago. Story 7. There was a flash flood in Zion National Park. I was hiking with my girlfriend, beautiful morning along a narrow 10 feet wide canyon. Then a sudden torrential deluge of rain came on. Suddenly, waterfalls carrying large rocks started coming down from the canyon rim above us. The rocks and boulders were ricocheting off the walls in all directions. With no place to hide, we huddled in the smallest ball we could make ourselves. It lasted about 20 minutes, but seemed like an hour. We both got hit by rocks, but nowhere vital. It took park emergency responders 12 hours to evacuate us. We had some huge bruises, but were otherwise okay. 2 other hikers weren't so lucky and didn't live that day. Story 8. I was followed to my car by this guy at my local library. He tried opening the door, but I had managed to run to my car and lock it quickly when I turned around and saw him speed walking towards me. Police told me after the debacle that he's been wanted for deadly violence, and his shtick is to follow women to their cars, inject them with something that makes them immediately pass out, and drive off. I made it by the skin of my teeth, all because I listened to my gut and turned around when I had that feeling of being watched. Story 9. I spun out while driving a truck with a plow attachment on the highway during a winter snowstorm. I did a 180-degree spin mere feet in front of a line of plow trucks. Time really did slow down momentarily, and while watching the phalanx of plows forcing their way towards me, I remember thinking, "Sucks to expire this way." I was so completely sure that I wouldn't live in that moment. It felt surreal, dreamlike, and fake, like I was watching someone else in a movie. Then I completed a full 360-degree spin, somehow narrowly avoiding collision with 3 plow trucks and several other vehicles around me. I had zero control of the vehicle, mind you. I spun another 90 degrees and crashed into a snowbank, truck bed first. Had I landed 6 feet in either direction, I would have smashed into a concrete wall. All in all, it was amazingly stupidly lucky. I was shaken but uninjured. The truck was completely unscathed. I finished my plowing route that night, albeit driving very slowly and whilst expressing gratitude for my fragile existence at every opportunity. I no longer drive a plow truck, by the way. Story 10. I had a stroke, and I felt like I was confused and having a panic attack, and my left hand wasn't working right. I knew it wasn't a heart attack because it didn't hurt, and then I saw the word stroke in my mind. It was a little bit like a bad acid trip, if any of you know anything about that. I couldn't figure out how to call for help, so I drove myself to the hospital 45 minutes away. When I walked into the ER and the receptionist asked what was wrong, all I could say was, "It's bad, that bad thing." I can't remember the word, and pointed to my head and said, "Brain," and she rushed me into the back and put an oxygen mask on me. The next day, when my doctor was quizzing me for speech and brain functionality, after a bunch of mundane questions, she asked if anything felt different. I told her I still couldn't feel my left hand and that really sucks because I own like 20 guitars, but all in all, it was worth gaining the ability to start fires with my mind. She looked at me for a few seconds with genuine concern and then cracked up laughing. Story 11. I was driving a 50-year-old truck with no airbags and only lap belts with no shoulder belts. A Nissan Altima going 105 miles per hour came into my lane and hit me head-on. Both of my legs were crushed from the knees down. My pelvis is broken, my back broken, my intestine torn, my arm broken, and my entire face was crushed. I had titanium rods in both legs, partially fused left ankle, a long screw across my pelvis, 2 rods in my back, and 16 plates in my face. It took 2 years before I could walk well enough to go back to work. Currently going on 3.5 years, and I still have daily pain from my injuries. Story 12. There's this park nearby that is in a river valley. Beautiful place. You park at the trailhead, then hike up for as long as you want. On the way up, we crossed the river on a fallen tree. On the way back, several hours later, it was raining with a storm coming in. Well, we thought it was just the best idea ever to cross the river again, which was now raging. So we cross, smoke some grass, because of course that's the reason why, and then cross back. On the way back, the water is even higher, pretty much spilling over the log, so footing is treacherous. The girl in front of me, the homeboy's girlfriend, slips and starts to fall. Luckily, I was right behind her and was able to grab the handle of the backpack she was wearing and hold her up long enough for her to get her footing. I didn't think much of it at the time, but years later, looking back, I realize how close to death we all were, crossing that damn log. The water was raging, and I mean raging. There were tons of deadfall in the water, so anyone falling in was not coming out alive. 'Cause that's the thing about falling into a river like that. It's not the drowning that kills you, it's being impaled on all the sticks and stumps that does it. The incident was never brought up, and I never had a chance to talk to the girl about it, but I do think of it every so often. Any of us could have easily passed away that day, most of all her and me. If I had been half a second too late, she would have fallen in for sure. If she hadn't caught her footing, she could have fallen in and taken me with her. I have done some dumb things in my life, but crossing that river a second time, while raining at the beginning of a storm, was just really stupid. Story 13. When I was 16, my family and I sheltered at a high school because of a Category 5 hurricane. We were in the hallways, and during the hurricane, the door swung wide open into an outside hallway, which was like a wind tunnel at that point. It took 5 men to hold the doors shut, while another person and I fixed the arm. I am fairly certain the pressure change damaged my hearing. After the hurricane was over, everyone was outside stretching their legs and smoking their cigarettes. We didn't know until the National Guard stationed there screamed at everyone to get back inside after tornadoes began spawning from the outer bands. I was right in the middle of the field trying to get away from all the noise, and right as I realized what was happening, the winds picked up. Pieces of debris were flying again. I dodged and rolled when pieces of metal from the awnings and the roof flew at me. My poor mom was outside screaming, and I only got out of that situation when someone ran out and snatched me. We had to do that ducking thing in the hallway until we got another okay. I am surprised I walked away without a scratch. More things happened, like being essayed twice and having a rusty nail drive through my foot during cleanup, but that was after the hurricane had properly passed. Story 14. I had an attempted break-in of my hotel room in Mexico City in about 1990. I was working there, installing software at the airport. I was young, tall, and blonde. I stuck out like a sore thumb. The hotel room gave me bad vibes because the lock was pitiful, like the kind you'd see in an American bathroom. I'd also been followed around a bit that day, to the extent that I was assigned 2 helpers who were to escort me as I moved about the airport. So I got done very late after finally getting my software installed working. I went to the hotel room with the suspicious lock and decided to pile everything not bolted down in front of the door. Nightstands, a table, a chair, and a suitcase. Then I plopped into bed. At about 4 a.m., I was awakened by a loud noise, saw light, heard another loud noise, and then saw no light. Near as I can figure, someone got the door open, and it smashed into all the crap I'd piled. Light from the hallway flooded into the room. They realized I was awake, and they couldn't get in. They slammed the door, and the light was blocked. A few hours later, under orders from the company president, I left. Story 15. When I was a kid, I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, I got a new mountain bike and wanted to go ride it a bit. I was going fast downhill on a street, and I thought the way was clear at the next stop, so I just kept going. What happened is that some young guy in his early 20s was driving a 90s Civic like a maniac and did not slow down at all at the stop. I think he was going at more than 60 km/h in a 30 km/h school zone. He tried to brake just before hitting me in a T-bone way. He still rammed me, just not as bad as it could have been, and I ended up rolling on his hood and windshield without a single scratch. My bike got screwed and pushed meters away. I still don't know how I survived that. Story 16. I had an accidental kayak crash. My daughter and I were having a great time, and then there was a random tree in the middle of the river. We tried to avoid it, but she was small and I wasn't strong enough, so I covered her before we hit, but was pretty much pinned under the tree below water, and so was she. I see those stories of people doing awesome things when their child is in danger, and this was one of those. I held her above water while I was drowning, just trying my best so she would be okay. My wonderful, smart little girl did something to help. She climbed the tree, which gave me another arm to get unstuck. The kayak was well down the river by then, and my back was bleeding really badly from the impact, but my girl was okay. We hiked to the nearest road, where an officer picked us up and drove us down to the meeting point where my buddies were. They recovered my kayak and called the police to look for us. But man, in those short minutes, I just kept thinking to myself, hold her above water. My injuries weren't too bad, but with the water exacerbating the injuries, I looked like Carrie. Story 17. When I was 10 years old, a treadmill fell with full force on my head. The thing was not in use in my house and was folded up against the wall, but I was looking for something that fell on the floor under a furniture that was adjacent to the treadmill, and I accidentally released it from the folded position with my foot, and it fell over me, smashing my head and knocking me unconscious. It could have broken my neck, and that would have been fatal for sure because it was a very heavy old treadmill. I still have a small balding spot and a minor skull deformity on the side of my head from that accident, and it was 22 years ago. Story 18. I had to decide to euthanize my dog. The day had started off normally, with a nice walk before work, and then he was trying so hard to convince me not to go. I wish I had listened because within a few hours he could barely walk and was exhibiting symptoms that led my mom and me to believe he was either poisoned or had had a stroke. At the time, I was working a job that had manipulated me so badly that my first reaction to my mom telling me what was going on wasn't let me go tell my manager I am leaving for a family emergency or even just we need to get him to the emergency vet now. It was will we be okay if I miss a few hours of work? They had me so convinced that I'd be financially screwed if I missed part of a shift, and I will hate myself a little for that for the rest of my life. Anyway, yes, I did leave work, and when my mom picked me up, and I saw my boy sitting there on the front seat, I broke down, apologizing to him for everything, and barely able to see because of it. Even though whatever was causing his symptoms, he was so happy to see me and was trying so hard to stand up and give me his usual "I am happy you're back" dance, but he just couldn't. The evet stabilized him, and while we waited, both my mom and I separately tried to apply for care credit. We weren't doing well financially at the time, so we didn't have an emergency vet fund. Neither one of us qualified. Then they told us the bad news. $2,000 to $3,000 right away, just for stabilizing him, then a further $3,000 to $4,000 in the morning to cover the cost of keeping him overnight for observation and diagnosis. Treatment after that would cost even more. I begged and begged, but they refused to allow me to do a payment plan. My only options were to pay that amount or pay $650 to have him euthanized and cremated. A gun-to-the-head moment, pay up or he passes away. I had no other option. I said goodbye to a dog who was the closest I will probably ever come to having a soulmate. He was my world, my heart, and 3 years later, on the 10th anniversary of the day his toxic previous owner gave him to me, thinking about his loss still cuts deep. There are songs I can't listen to, foods I can't eat, and things I can't do without thinking of him. For months afterwards, I genuinely didn't know how I was supposed to go on. I saw him everywhere, smelled him and heard his voice. I have one audio clip of him barking, and sometimes I will sit there listening to it on repeat, because I would do almost anything to have him back. Story 19. I was essayed by a close group of friends in my senior year of high school. I thought they were friends, but they were just older college men who bought me alcohol and thought they could do as they pleased. I remember asking for water, and they gave me a cup of water, but it tasted off. I started to black out. I thought it was the previous several drinks I had just had. My family wouldn't believe me that I was essayed. I came from a very conservative Catholic household. They called me names, and when they told my grandparents, my own grandfather took it as a sign to do further damage to me. I woke up one night to him essaying me. It's been almost 13 years since then. I've been to therapy, I take medication for a panic disorder, and I am a stay-at-home mother now to two beautiful kids, but each day feels like I am struggling to stay alive. I feel like I am only pushing through all these dark feelings and emotions so that I don't disappoint my husband and children. The truth is, I feel like such a damaged person, like something is actually broken in my head, and it just makes me wish I wasn't me. I am surprised I am still alive at this point and still pushing through enough to make future plans with my family. Story 20. I had a birth defect in my stomach when I was born. It amounted to an ulcer that ruptured when I was 6 months old. To make it better, I had a malformed blood vessel artery that also ruptured. My dad told me that I nearly died because I was bleeding faster than they could get blood back in and fix the ulcer. I got some wicked scars from that one. 20 years later, I discovered that I had hepatitis C from the blood transfusions. 15 years after that, I participated in 2 drug trials before I found one that cured it. Around 2 years old, I fell into a swimming pool at a packed house party hosted by one of Mom's friends. I fell into the water and drifted down to the bottom of the pool, hitting my head on the bottom, unable to breathe, and my vision went black. Next thing I recall, I am on my back spitting up water. A random party attendee jumped in and pulled me out. My mother had no idea where I was or that I'd fallen into the pool. I was taken inside, my clothes removed, and I sat on a brown couch in a towel watching television while my clothes dried. I had no recollection of this event until, at the age of 22, I was talking to her friend where the party was, and she asked if I remembered almost passing away at her house, and it all came back to me like a wave. At the age of 3, I was riding a tricycle on an elevated porch, tipped the tricycle over, and rolled down the short but steeply pitched front yard, falling about 2 feet to the sidewalk and hitting my head. A woman walking down the sidewalk picked me up and yelled at the house to get attention. My mother came out, snatched me from the woman's arms, and took me inside. I don't recall getting medical care. I lay on the couch for a week and did nothing but watch cartoons. You know those old 5-gallon water bottles often found in offices? They used to be made of glass. When I was 6 or 7, I broke a Sparkletts 5-gallon water bottle on my foot, nearly severing my big toe on my left foot. Blood everywhere. Did my mother take me to the hospital? Nope. Wrapped it in gauze and peroxide and kept my foot elevated. A week later, my aunt happened to come over and saw my red, swollen foot. She took me to the hospital, and I got stitches to close it up. At the age of 7 or 8, I got hit in the head with a large rubber mallet and fell down a flight of stairs. It felt like my brain was swelling around my eyes, and I passed out. I woke up several hours later, lying on my bed in the apartment, completely alone. Both of my legs hurt. I am pretty sure I bruised a couple of ribs, zero medical care. It hurt to breathe heavily, laugh, or sigh for what felt like months. At the age of 10, my mother took me to the U.S. festival. There were probably 200,000 people in attendance each of the 3 days. We were with a group of her friends, and shortly after we arrived, I got separated from them. I spent a panicked hour looking through a sea of people for anyone I'd recognize with no luck. I somehow attached myself to a random couple who gave me food and soda for several hours while helping me locate my mother. Several hours later, we ran into one of the friends, and he took me back to the car. They were on their way back home, and he had to take a piss. It was sheer dumb luck that we ran into him, and that I recognized him because I didn't know him well at all. Story 21. When my daughter was a year and a half old, she developed a high fever. Alternated Advil and ibuprofen, but nothing worked. I ended up taking her to the emergency late at night. They gave her a massive ibuprofen shot and sent us home. This continued for a couple of days, and we simply couldn't get the fever down, so they'd simply superdose her with ibuprofen. By day 3, she looked like a lifeless rag doll hanging onto my shirt as I carried her. I kept complaining about how she was deteriorating, but their response was, It's just a fever. Stop coming here." I drove to another city, took her to a different hospital, and they x-rayed her lungs. She had half of one lung functioning. The rest of her lungs were covered by bacterial pneumonia. They flipped out and put her on antibiotics for 4 weeks to clear it. She told me that if I hadn't been so relentless, she would have passed away from pneumonia. I went back to the first hospital and complained, but they covered their butts. The doctor who had seen us each time neglected to sign the form that he had seen us as patients. So, they had no record of us talking to a doctor there, only a nurse. Even when I pointed directly at the doctor as he walked past the reception and said, "That guy right there," they covered his butt and would not allow me to file a complaint there. Story 22. I randomly nearly drowned in the sea, very close to shore and with people and relatives around me. There was just a massive, sudden change of depth. Maybe something was dug out. I am not sure, but I was walking on the seabed one moment and then dropped down underwater in a second. It was super unexpected, so I gasped, and my lungs flooded with water. I somehow made it out, only to see a very puzzled look on my relatives' faces. They didn't even realize. I almost drowned when I was around 5 years old at a beach party on a river that my parents and their friends went to regularly. We kids were playing with a kneeboard, and I strapped into one and ended up capsized, still strapped to the board and stuck underwater for a little while. Luckily, a relatively sober adult noticed one unaccounted-for child and the upside-down kneeboard and put 2 and 2 together in time. I also had my back to the shore, and I was bouncing with the waves until I went over one wave, and the ground was gone, and was replaced with a void. I came up, turned around, and realized a current had pulled me so far out I couldn't see the shore over the waves. I definitely thought dying was a possibility, but I swam parallel with the shore and made it back just in time for the lifeguards and my wife to yell at me. It was equally the scariest time of my life, and the most embarrassing. There were hundreds of people around. Story 23. I hemorrhaged a week after our last baby was born. We told the nurse who released me from the hospital with our baby that I had a temp of 100 degrees Fahrenheit even on Loratab, which has acetaminophen, but she blew me off. 7 days later, I got to the ED just as everything went completely sideways. I thought I was just tired from taking care of a newborn. Turns out my temperature was over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. At one point, the doctors had me bleeding into a bucket. They put a sheet up so I couldn't see, but my husband, who was holding my hand, saw everything. I remember hearing blood hitting inside that bucket. I asked one of the people helping me if I was not going to live. They said, "I don't know." A week of IV antibiotics and a couple of blood transfusions later, I left the hospital too weak to stand. Incidentally, the Station 11 miniseries taught me the right answer when someone asks if they're going to die. It's "You're doing great." They're doing the best they can, and they might lose anyway. Story 24. My dad was drunk driving when I was 4 years old and crashed going more than 60 miles per hour into a parked car. I had a gnarly skull fracture and brain damage and ended up flatlining from blood loss, but the medics went ahead and jumped me like a car and got me going again. I have a scar across my right eyebrow as a trophy. I am now 17 and have had chronic and severe migraines ever since. They've gotten easier to deal with and are less frequent. They still make me vomit from the pain, though not every time, but it happens. It's a blessing and a curse, as my brain has been damaged and I tend to have a weak memory. But as it began to heal, it started the development of that area of my brain affecting my rational thinking, impulse control, etc. I have the thought process of a 25-year-old in a 17-year-old's body. At least that's what my neurologist said. I hold no animosity towards my dad and still have a good relationship with him. He's getting back on his feet and trying to straighten up, mostly because he was told that he'll not live from liver failure if he keeps up this lifestyle. Story 25. Hairy cell leukemia. because it's a slow-moving form of cancer, and I was living with it for probably about 2 years before the symptoms got so bad that I went to my doctor to figure out what was wrong with me. About 2 hours after I saw him, he called back with my blood screen results and told me to get to an emergency room immediately. I was in the ER in about 15 minutes, and when they looked at my blood levels, the level of healthy white blood cells was so low that they were amazed I was even standing. They're even more amazed when I tell them I'd been moving furniture, gigging with my band, and generally leading my life. As things continued, I found out that if I were to have fallen and potentially bonked my head, I wouldn't even be here today because of the potential bleeding. Happy to be here. Happy to be posting about this, and happy to be on the other side of it. Story 26. I was a pastor who got guilted into going an hour and a half away to pick a woman up from the hospital. I almost had to go by myself. I mentioned that it was not appropriate. Thankfully, I found someone to go with me. While she was getting into the car, I got a phone call saying that she was a wanted criminal. I had to act like everything was normal. I said, "Let me run into the hospital and use the restroom real quick." There happens to be a group of police officers by the restroom. I approached them and told them that they needed to walk up to the van and ask for the woman's ID because she was wanted. At first, they did not believe me. They thought I was hazing them or her. Thankfully, they finally listened, came up to the vehicle, and ended up arresting her. I don't have a doubt in my mind that after the full story came out, she would absolutely been willing to off someone to get out of it. Story 27. I had a kitchen knife rammed into my left pec. I pulled it out and had a collapsed lung. I woke up the next day with a zipper and tubes sticking out of everywhere. As I walked out, the head of trauma surgery caught me at the door, who happens to be a longtime friend who I prayed to save me in the ambulance, and said, "You know, JR, a centimeter in any direction and we wouldn't have saved you. You're a walking miracle." That was 2012. At 51, I can face it and be okay with it now. I left my mark, I had my kids, and I appreciate all I have and the time that I got. The worst part of that experience was when they put the chest tube in. I felt that cut raw, and the sound of the suction pop haunted me for years. I am tightening up and cringing right now thinking about it. Story 28. My car got struck from behind by a reckless driver who lost control of his car from speeding like a crazy mofo. Dude pretty much blew out a good chunk of my car, and my car proceeded to flip over several times across a moving highway. Thankfully, other drivers were attentive enough to come to a full halt as I was being flipped over, and my car parts were scattered across multiple lanes. I had to wait for someone to help me climb out of my car because my car was all crushed up and I was caged inside. Story 29. I had an awful childhood, full of hate. I truly thought I was a monster because why else didn't anyone love me? I had already attempted twice. I truly believed I was going to attempt successfully as soon as I left home, so my siblings wouldn't see anything scarring. Most people were completely unaware of how screwed up my life was. I went camping with friends, and 2 of us ended up lost in the bush. I got hypothermia and was legitimately passing away. As it was happening, I had a weird sort of out-of-body experience, and I swear, I was given a choice. I knew at that moment I could let go and I would succumb, or I could stay. I will never know exactly why, but I chose to stay. My friend was able to warm my body up enough that I survived, but I truly believe I only lived because I chose to, despite passing away being the better option. I am very glad I decided to stay. Currently cuddling my snoozing son, waiting for my husband to come home. Story 30. Dad had a car accident when I was 9. It was just a normal morning on November 21st, 2009. Mom was driving, and I was in the front seat, sitting with my left leg under my right thigh. We were on our way to town the same way as always. We hit a bridge head-on, going roughly 45 to 55 miles per hour. I was on the side with the main impact. Airbags did not deploy. The whole engine came in on my right leg. If I had not been sitting how I was, both would have been crushed. I hit my head pretty hard, apparently, because I lost sight in my left eye. I should have passed away being a 9-year-old weighing roughly 70 to 80 pounds. Story 31. When I was 8 or so, I ran across the street to go home. It looked clear, but there was a car speeding towards me. I stopped when my neighbor screamed like she was hurt. The speeding car passed within a foot of me, and none of the cars behind it or coming the other way stopped, so I was stuck in the middle of the road for what seemed like a long time. When I was 12, my family rented a cabin in the snow. It was almost dark, and I was on my own playing just outside the porch when 2-3 feet of snow slid off the roof just behind me. If I had been a little further back, it would have buried me. As an adult, I had a few suspicious people watching me when I did armored transit, and shortly after I was fired, my partner was in a shootout with 2 guys. Story 32. In an old house I lived in, one of the outlets in my bedroom in the basement was very poorly grounded. One day, I went to plug in my phone charger and was accidentally touching the prongs of the adapter. I shocked myself so badly, I literally couldn't move for like 10 seconds, and my whole arm was numb for hours. The other was when I was just learning to ride a bike, and my family decided to go on a ride on a trail through a local forest preserve. There were 2 problems. The forest preserve is in a huge valley, and there were 2 separate trails, one steep, winding trail for pedestrians and a shallow, straight trail for bikes. My family accidentally went to the steep pedestrian trail, and so I zoomed down the trail, which was made of gravel, and struggled to stop. Eventually, my front tire catches a bigger rock amongst the gravel, and I am launched off the bike, skidding along the gravel and finally coming to a stop just inches from smashing my head into a concrete barrier. I walked away with my jeans ripped to shreds and my knees having basically no skin left, but it could have been so much worse. Story 33. I was going through a divorce, and I took a bunch of meds and drank an entire bottle of liquor straight out of the bottle. I have vague memories of stumbling around the house. It was like my body weighed 500 pounds. My muscles weren't working. I tried to prop myself up on the coffee table but slipped and bashed my eye into the corner. Luckily, it didn't get my actual eyeball, but I nailed the bone below it. I woke up with a huge black eye. I remember crying and begging for it to be over. No matter what I did, I could not move my body. I had to roll down the hallway at one point just to reach my bed. I don't know how long I was unconscious. I did all of that on a Wednesday, and when I came to, it was Friday evening. I feel like I shouldn't have lived, but did by some freaking chance. I have only small snippets of memory from all of that. I was alone in the house, and it would have been days before somebody found me. Story 34. I was in a car crash, no seatbelt, as I was stupid and drunk. I had my friend next to me, who also didn't have one. We were sitting in the back seat. The driver was drunk. We were going around 100 kilometers per hour on a rural road, and there was a sharp turn. We just flew out of the turn, right into an electric pole, almost broke it in half, and it almost fell on us if it wasn't for the electric wires holding it. If it wasn't for the pole, we would crashed into a ditch next to it and probably wouldn't have lived. My friend slammed into me, and I was crushed between him and the door. I can still feel pain from it years later. I never went to a doctor because I didn't want anyone to find out, especially my mother, who's super toxic. It low-key ruined my life, but here I am, living, doing martial arts, and expressing that pain through art, music, and architecture. A living example of stupidity and resilience. Story 35. Ages 12 to 25 were incredibly crazy, and I am very blessed that I am where I am today instead of 6 feet under. I survived a serial offender. Well, I believe the offender was a pile of crap, and I survived that by pretending to be in love with him. After he did horrible things to me, I just acted like I fell in love with him. He totally bought it, and I was able to escape. After that, I just kind of went nuts and hitchhiked all over the place and jumped in cars with strangers to go party all the time and just did all kinds of horribly precarious things. And today, I am the total opposite. I am safe and kind. I think about what I do before I do it, and I am very grateful that I made it past my 25th birthday and grew up without too many scars at least. Story 36. I was in a massive car accident when I was 10. My parents and siblings were in the car too, but our car got hit from the side exactly where I was sitting, and I was the only one seriously injured in the crash. What saved me was that we had a very sturdy car, and of course that I was wearing my seatbelt. Funnily, my being so young also helped, because my massive concussion probably would have at least left me with brain damage if I had been an adult. I was unconscious for 3 days after the accident, and when I woke up, everyone was so relieved. And more relieved when I spoke again for the first time about 2-3 days after that. I still have a big scar on my forehead more than 20 years later from more than 15 stitches after they removed all the glass shards from my skin. Story 37. I got really sick years ago. A regular cold turned into pneumonia. I was sick for 6 or 7 months, and I was in and out of the hospital. They had to put IVs in my armpits, basically because all the veins in my forearms and hands were either blown or I was too dehydrated for them to reach. I had to get steroid shots in my butt every day for 7 days, and I had to take 2 different nebulizer treatments every couple of hours just to be able to breathe. I got bronchospasms. I would cough so hard I would black out, so I had to stop going to work. I cracked 3 ribs, 2 on the left and 1 on the right. I genuinely have no clue how I survived any of that. I think it was just my young body and constant care from doctors. It was absolutely miserable, and then to top it all off, as soon as I got better, my emotional support dog passed away. I already didn't want to live all that much, so when that happened, it really felt like the final nail in the coffin. Now, anytime I get any form of chest congestion, I get war flashbacks of that illness. Story 38. In the RFS, a volunteer fire service in Australia, I've been caught in 3 separate overruns where the fire basically comes in super fast and hot, and there's no way of getting out, getting in the truck, overhead sprinklers, and blankets. I fell out of a tree when I was a kid, near our local river, and fell from pretty high up, for a kid, onto rocks covered in oysters. When I was in cadets JROTC, we spent time on an actual military base. We wandered into a live minefield. Story 39. I choked on my own vomit when I was like 14. I had a double ear infection and was prescribed amoxicillin. Turns out I am allergic to amoxicillin, and it makes me violently ill and lethargic and causes minor swelling in my throat. I also didn't realize I was experiencing an allergic reaction for like 5 days and just thought that that was what amoxicillin just did. My little sister found me choking on the bathroom floor after I aspirated my own vomit. She ended up screaming because our dad managed to clear my airway and then told me I was overreacting. That experience made me never want to eat mashed potatoes again, as that's what I last ate and was struggling to throw up. Story 40. My entire life, I think that if I were to give an absolutely true account, most folks would accuse me of lying or at least exaggerating using hyperbole. However, all the stories I have from 5 years old to 52 years old would be 100% true, as well as corroborated, witnessed true. I should have passed away or become a serial offender or the best stuntman ever, been hit by things that literally missed several hundred people, been the #1 witness to drug use, racism, violence, random accidents, familial turmoil, mental trauma, been a continual target as the only white kid in a neighborhood, been in continual combat, had 100 save-my-life fights before I was 13. Some kids tried beating me up, but I ran and successfully made it home. But my stepdad wanted to know why I am all beat up. I then got beat up by him, went to school, got beat up, joined the Marines, got beat up, offed some folks. I have multiple broken bones, muscles, and nerves. That government of mine says I am too young to be disabled. I don't know if I should keep going or not. I can, but now it really seems like it's all made up. But I haven't even touched the sauce. Once I was a little drunk. I drank more than I usually do with my bro for Father's Day. He said, "Why does the smartest, toughest man I've ever known not have a loving wife, significant other, kids, or a semi-normal life?" I tried to explain all the crap that happened. None of it made sense to normal folks. Not him, not me, not anyone. Life is chaotic. I suck in my belly and don't show my limp at the grocery store in fear of getting attacked out of weakness. I decide and realize that's bonkers and untrue, so I stop doing that, and then I get attacked at the grocery store and robbed for showing weakness. It's all BS. Story 41. Back when I was still severely addicted to alcohol, I once took a 12-pack down near a bridge not far from my college and drank, and drank, and drank. Well, I woke up 3 hours later, on a couch, 2 cities over. I didn't drive, I didn't have a car or license or even know how to drive during this time. I was surrounded by people I didn't know. Some guy sipping on a whole bottle of Everclear, a pregnant woman, her big tough guy husband, and a friend of these people who just got off their shift from a club. And they all took good care of me, helped me sober up, gave me a change of clothes, and bandaged up my badly bleeding arm. And in the morning, the husband made me breakfast, and a friend of a friend who knew them and went to my college picked me up. To this day, I don't know how I didn't just stay stranded or worse. I will never even know how I got to these people, but I am forever grateful for how they helped me out. Story 42. A few friends and I had the great idea to try and teach another friend how to swim in rough waters above a small waterfall. Everything was going swimmingly until I got overconfident and got caught by the current. I got pulled down into a 7-foot chute that fed the main crest. I stopped myself just in time. I shifted to basically sitting in the water with my back to the wall and feet on the opposite side of the chute. I sat there in the water for almost 3 hours till my friends could get search and rescue to pull me out. They then threatened to drown a guy who was heckling from the shore upstream. Story 43. I wasn't a good swimmer, but I decided to follow a group in a cave with narrow passages filled with water and, on the way out, open sea and just high rocky walls. I was behind almost everyone and started getting too tired and was too far to go back. Going on my back wasn't an option as there were small waves. I thought, that's it. I was almost out of breath. But then, in a desperate attempt to see something or someone, I saw a 10-centimeter wide crack on the wall, which led to in-wall climbing stairs. I held there for 3 minutes contemplating my decision-making strategy. I climbed up and made it back to shore. I was so furious at myself for doing that, but luckily, I didn't drown. Story 44. I had a swimming pool incident. The stupid pool had these attachable floats on the surface. All across one side of it, like ice, I got swept under one and the entire thing moved. I was only young, not strong enough to push it up. Kids were all playing on it. I instantly panicked, running out of air. I swam and hit the wall, swam another way at random, and reached open water. Another 5–10 seconds, and I would have been gone, and no one would have known it for some time. My niece goes swimming there now, and I am happy to report they no longer have those attachable floats. Story 45. My gallbladder has bitten the dust, and I had no idea. No side effects until late one night. I feel like I am having a heart attack. While the ER was waiting for blood results, they were prepping to send me home and told me to cut out greasy foods. Until the blood work results came back, I was septic and was showing no signs except the chest pain. No fever, no nausea, nothing. The change in the doctor's face was instant. I was instantly admitted, given 2 different IV antibiotics at the same time, and my blood work was drawn every 2 hours until they could safely take the gallbladder out. The whole process took 48 hours. Story 46. I almost crashed once, and I have no idea how I survived. I was driving at night on the 26th of December 2023. That Christmas was warm and wet, so ice was a distant memory, but the roads were spontaneously icy on the 26th. I had no idea. I had been driving for about 2 hours by this time without issue, and then I turned onto a back road. There was a strange color on the road. I thought it was the road drying off, but it was actually ice. I was tipping along at a happy 60 kilometers per hour. I drove into a sweeping bend, and the car wobbled. The traction control light came on, and I felt the car slide out from under me. I didn't fight it. I just took my foot off all the pedals and held the steering wheel gently. The car just corrected itself and carried on. They've had plenty of near misses in the car. That one was the scariest. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.